Chosen one, listen closely, because there is a reason your heart has been restless, a reason certain memories keep returning, and a reason the name J seems to carry a weight you cannot fully explain. What if God allowed this connection to enter your life not simply to give you a person, but to reveal something about you, about love, about timing, and about the path He is preparing for you? Sometimes the people who enter our lives are not accidents. They become mirrors, lessons, confirmations, or turning points. And today, you may finally understand why J appeared when they did, why the connection affected you so deeply, and why God may be revealing the real purpose behind it now. Chosen one, there are moments in life when God allows a person to cross your path at a time you never expected. You may have been focused on yourself, rebuilding your confidence, healing from something you never talked about, or simply trying to move forward without knowing exactly where you were going. Then suddenly, J appeared. Maybe it was through a conversation, a friendship, a workplace, a chance encounter, a message, or a situation that seemed ordinary at first. But something about it felt different. Something about this person touched a part of you that had been quiet for a long time. And perhaps that is why you have struggled to understand what happened. You may have asked yourself why you cared so much. Why did this person remain on your mind? Why did their words affect you differently from everyone else's? Why did certain moments with them feel strangely significant? Why did the connection bring both excitement and confusion? Why did it awaken emotions you thought you had already moved beyond? Chosen one, sometimes the significance of a person is not immediately revealed when they enter your life. God does not always explain the assignment at the beginning. Sometimes you only understand the purpose after you have walked through the experience. You may have wanted an answer from J, but God may have been trying to give you an answer about yourself. You may have wanted clarity about their feelings, but God may have been developing clarity about your own heart. You may have wanted to know whether J was meant to stay, while God was teaching you that your destiny cannot depend entirely on whether another person stays. That distinction matters, because not every meaningful connection is necessarily a permanent connection. Some people arrive to awaken something. Some arrive to challenge something. Some arrive to expose something. Some arrive to prepare you for something. And sometimes, a person can have a powerful purpose in your story without being the final chapter. That does not make the connection meaningless. It makes it purposeful. Perhaps J came into your life during a season when you had forgotten how deeply you could feel. You had become guarded. You had learned to protect yourself. You had stopped expecting people to understand you. You had convinced yourself that being independent meant never needing anyone. You had learned how to smile while carrying things nobody knew about. Then J came along, and suddenly your emotional world shifted. You began noticing things you had stopped noticing. You started thinking about the future differently. You started wondering whether connection was still possible. You started imagining conversations that had not happened yet. You started believing, even if only for a moment, that maybe there was still something beautiful waiting for you. And chosen one, sometimes God uses a person to remind you that your heart is still alive. Not necessarily because that person is your forever person, but because you needed to discover that the part of you capable of hope had never truly died. Maybe J did not create that part of you. Maybe J revealed it. There is a difference. God may have already placed that capacity inside you, but you needed a circumstance that brought it to the surface. You needed someone to activate a part of your emotional world that had been buried underneath disappointment, rejection, fear, and self-protection. And now you are being asked to look deeper. Instead of only asking, why did J come into my life? Ask yourself, who was I becoming when J entered my life? That question can change everything, because sometimes the timing tells you more than the person does. Look at what was happening around you when J appeared. What were you praying about? What were you struggling with? What had you recently lost? What had you recently learned? What were you beginning to desire? What boundaries were you beginning to establish? What version of yourself were you leaving behind? Perhaps J arrived during a transition. Perhaps you were becoming more confident. Perhaps you were finally learning to value yourself. Perhaps you were leaving behind relationships that drained you. Perhaps you were learning that love without respect is not enough. Perhaps you were discovering that attention is not the same thing as commitment. Perhaps you were realizing that chemistry is not the same thing as compatibility. And maybe J became part of that lesson. Chosen one, God can use an encounter to reveal what you will and will not accept anymore. You may have once accepted inconsistency because you were afraid of losing someone. You may have chased answers because silence made you anxious. You may have over-explained yourself because you wanted to be understood. You may have given too much because you believed love had to be earned. But something changed. Maybe J brought you to a point where you finally realized, I cannot abandon myself just to keep someone else. That realization is powerful, because your life is not supposed to become a waiting room where you sit endlessly hoping another person will decide your worth. You are not valuable because J chooses you. You are valuable before J ever knows your name. You are not chosen because another human being finally recognizes your beauty, your heart, your gifts, or your potential. You are chosen because God already knows who He created you to be. And perhaps the real reason J came into your life was to help you understand that. Maybe J showed you what you desire. Maybe they revealed what you had been missing. Maybe they awakened your standards. Maybe they showed you qualities you want in a future partner. Maybe they exposed patterns you never want to repeat. Maybe they challenged your expectations. Maybe they forced you to become honest about what you truly want, and perhaps that honesty is part of your preparation. Chosen one, you have to be careful not to confuse emotional intensity with divine confirmation. A strong feeling can be real without being a prophecy. A connection can feel powerful without automatically meaning it is destined to become a relationship. A person can occupy your thoughts without being assigned to occupy your future. This is where discernment becomes important. You do not need to force a meaning onto every interaction. You do not need to interpret every glance as a sign. You do not need to turn every coincidence into a promise. Instead, watch the fruit, watch character, watch consistency, watch honesty. Watch how you feel after interacting with them. Do you become more peaceful or more consumed? Do you become more grounded or more anxious? Do you become more yourself, or do you feel pressured to perform? Does the connection encourage growth, honesty, respect, and healthy boundaries? Because what is truly good for you should not require you to destroy yourself to keep it alive. And chosen one, this may be one of the most important things God is revealing through J. You are learning the difference between longing and alignment. Longing says, I want this person. Alignment asks, is this connection healthy, mutual, honest, and consistent with the life I am building? Longing can be loud. Alignment is often quiet. Longing can make you obsess over possibilities. Alignment pays attention to reality. Longing focuses on what could happen. Alignment looks at what is actually happening. And perhaps God is teaching you to stop building entire futures from small moments. You deserve something that does not require constant decoding. You deserve communication that does not leave you guessing every day. You deserve affection that does not disappear whenever things become inconvenient. You deserve relationships where effort flows both ways. You deserve honesty. You deserve peace. Maybe J came into your life to teach you that. Perhaps you were accustomed to chasing people who gave you crumbs of attention. Perhaps you believed that if you loved someone hard enough, patiently enough, faithfully enough, eventually they would become what you needed them to be. But God may be breaking that pattern, and sometimes breaking a pattern feels like losing something. You may think you are losing J, when in reality you are losing the version of yourself that was willing to settle. That can hurt. Even growth can hurt. Even answered prayers can sometimes arrive disguised as endings. Chosen one, not every closed door is punishment. Some closed doors are protection. Some delays are preparation. Some disappointments are redirections. Some unanswered questions are invitations to stop asking the wrong question. Maybe you keep asking, does J love me? But perhaps the deeper question is, do I love myself enough to accept only what is healthy for me? Maybe you keep asking, will J come back? But perhaps the deeper question is, if J comes back, will the situation actually be different? Maybe you keep asking, was J sent by God? But perhaps the deeper question is, what did this connection teach me about what God wants me to understand? Because the lesson can remain even when the person does not. And that lesson may become part of your future. Think about the strength you developed because of what happened. Think about the conversations you had with yourself. Think about the boundaries you began to establish. Think about the standards you started to raise. Think about the parts of your personality you rediscovered. Think about the dreams you started taking seriously again. Maybe J was a catalyst, and a catalyst can change the direction of a life without becoming the destination. Perhaps this person entered your life to push you toward a version of yourself you had been avoiding. Maybe you became more courageous. Maybe you started speaking honestly. Maybe you finally stopped pretending that you were satisfied with less. Maybe you realized that your heart needs more than attraction. Maybe you learned that emotional safety matters. Maybe you discovered that love must include friendship, respect, accountability, and consistency. These are not small lessons. They are foundational. Chosen one, there may also be another reason J came into your life to expose what still needed healing. Sometimes a person does not cause the wound. They reveal it. Maybe their distance triggered abandonment fears. Maybe their silence made you question your worth. Maybe their attention made you feel valuable, and their absence made you feel invisible. If that happened, do not shame yourself. Look at it honestly. Ask what the reaction is trying to teach you, because you should never have to make another person's behavior responsible for your identity. If someone responds to you, you are still worthy. If someone ignores you, you are still worthy. If someone chooses you, you are still worthy. If someone walks away, you are still worthy. Their decision may affect your circumstances, but it does not determine your value, and perhaps that is exactly what God wanted you to learn. You cannot build a stable identity on an unstable relationship. You cannot build peace on constant uncertainty. You cannot build your future around someone else's indecision. You cannot keep postponing your life while waiting for another person to become ready. Chosen one. There is a difference between patience and self-abandonment. Patience can be peaceful. Self-abandonment is exhausting. Patience allows reality to unfold. Self-abandonment tries to control the outcome. Patience says, I trust what is meant for me will meet me in the right way. Self-abandonment says, I have to make this work no matter what. Maybe you have been learning that difference through J. And maybe the greatest revelation is not whether J stays. It is who you become because you refuse to lose yourself anymore. Perhaps one day you will look back and realize that this connection was the moment you began taking yourself seriously. The moment you stopped begging for clarity. The moment you stopped chasing mixed signals. The moment you stopped romanticizing inconsistency. The moment you stopped confusing potential with reality. The moment you stopped accepting less because you were afraid nothing better would come. That moment could become one of the most important turning points of your life. And if J is genuinely meant to have a continuing place in your story, you will not have to manufacture it through desperation. Healthy connection can withstand honesty. Healthy connection can survive boundaries. Healthy connection does not require manipulation. Healthy connection does not depend on you becoming smaller. If the connection is meant to grow, it can grow through mutual effort, clear communication, and genuine respect. And if it does not grow, you can still move forward without believing that your life has lost its purpose. Because your purpose was never contained inside another person. Chosen one, you must understand this deeply. God can bring people into your life without making them the center of your life. There is a difference between appreciating someone and worshiping the possibility of them. There is a difference between loving someone and losing yourself in them. There is a difference between hoping for reconciliation and putting your entire life on pause. You can care deeply and still have boundaries. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can love someone and still recognize that the relationship may not be healthy. You can believe there was meaning in the connection without insisting that you know its final outcome. That is maturity. That is discernment. That is freedom. And perhaps this is where your season is changing. Maybe God is moving you from asking for signs to developing wisdom, from chasing confirmation to observing character, from obsession to peace, from fantasy to reality, from fear to trust, from needing someone else to validate your future to becoming confident in the path ahead. J may have been part of that transition, and perhaps that is why the connection felt so significant. Not because you were supposed to lose yourself inside it, but because you were supposed to find yourself through it. There are people who enter your life and make you feel seen. There are people who enter your life and make you feel challenged. There are people who enter your life and make you feel loved. And there are people who enter your life and make you realize how much you still need to love yourself. Maybe J did more than one of those things. Maybe their presence brought something to the surface that you could no longer ignore. And now, chosen one, the next part belongs to you. You cannot control what J thinks. You cannot control what J chooses. You cannot control whether J returns. You cannot control the timeline, but you can control whether you continue becoming the person you were called to become. You can choose peace. You can choose honesty. You can choose patience without passivity. You can choose hope without obsession. You can choose love without abandoning your boundaries. You can choose to let reality speak louder than your fears. And perhaps that is the real reason J came into your life. Maybe J was not simply there to be loved. Maybe J was there to reveal how you love. Maybe they revealed where you were strong. Maybe they revealed where you were still wounded. Maybe they revealed what you wanted. Maybe they revealed what you would no longer tolerate. Maybe they revealed that your heart still had hope. Maybe they revealed that you were ready for something deeper. Maybe they were a mirror. Maybe they were a lesson. Maybe they were a turning point, and maybe they were a beginning. And maybe the beautiful part is that you do not have to know the final meaning today. You can allow the meaning to unfold. Because sometimes God reveals the reason only after you stop forcing the answer. Sometimes clarity comes when you stop chasing the person. Sometimes peace arrives when you stop demanding certainty. Sometimes the greatest revelation is simply realizing that you are okay regardless of the outcome. Chosen one, imagine reaching that place. Imagine waking up and not needing a message from J to determine your mood. Imagine seeing their name without your entire nervous system reacting. Imagine remembering the connection without feeling that your future depends on it. Imagine being grateful for what you learned without needing the story to end exactly the way you imagined. That is freedom, and perhaps you are closer to it than you think. The version of you who first met J may not be the same version of you listening to these words now. You have learned, you have felt, you have questioned, you have grown, And whether J remains part of your life or not, the growth is yours, the wisdom is yours, the boundaries are yours, the self-respect is yours, the healing is yours, the future is yours to walk toward. So do not reduce this entire experience to one question. Was J the one? There may be a much bigger question waiting for you. Who was I becoming because J entered my life? That is where the deeper revelation may be hiding, because maybe Ja came into your life at the exact moment you needed to wake up. Maybe you needed to remember your worth. Maybe you needed to raise your standards. Maybe you needed to heal an old wound. Maybe you needed to understand the kind of love you truly desire. Maybe you needed to stop chasing people who could not meet you. Maybe you needed to learn that God's timing cannot be forced. Maybe you needed to discover that what is truly aligned with your life will not require you to betray yourself. And now, chosen one, you are entering a different kind of season. A season where you do not have to chase what is meant to find you. A season where you do not have to beg for what should be freely given. A season where you do not have to convince someone of your value. A season where you can allow actions to speak. A season where you can let time reveal character. A season where you can trust that whatever belongs in your life will have room to grow without you carrying the entire weight of it alone. And if J has a genuine role in that future, let that role reveal itself through reality. Do not force it. Do not fear it. Do not idolize it. Do not destroy yourself trying to preserve it. Let it breathe. Let people reveal who they are. Let time reveal what is real. Let consistency reveal intention. Let peace guide you, and above everything, keep becoming the person you were created to become. Because chosen one, there is something bigger than the question of who J is. It is the question of who you are becoming now that you have encountered them. Maybe this entire experience was never meant to leave you obsessed with another person's presence. Maybe it was meant to awaken your own. Maybe you were supposed to return to yourself. Maybe you were supposed to discover that your heart could love again without becoming dependent. Maybe you were supposed to realize that your future is bigger than one relationship. Maybe you were supposed to understand that sometimes God allows someone to enter your life not to complete you, but to awaken you. And if that is what happened, then the story is still unfolding. Because what J awakened in you may be the very thing that carries you into your next season. The confidence, the wisdom, the discernment, the courage, the standards, the healing, the ability to love without losing yourself, the ability to walk away without hatred, the ability to stay without desperation, the ability to wait without putting your life on hold. And perhaps chosen one, this is where you finally begin to see the connection differently. Not as a mystery you must solve, but as an experience you are allowed to learn from, grow through, and carry forward with wisdom, while allowing whatever comes next to reveal itself in its own time. Chosen one. And maybe that is why you have been feeling something shift inside you lately. It may not be that everything around you has changed. It may be that you have changed enough to see everything differently. The same memories that once made you desperate for answers may now be teaching you patience. The same silence that once frightened you may now be giving you space to hear your own thoughts. The same distance that once felt like rejection may now be revealing what you were unwilling to see when the connection was close. Sometimes God does not change the situation first. He changes your perspective. And when your perspective changes, the situation begins to look completely different. You may realize that what you once called confusion was actually information. What you once called rejection may have been an opportunity to stop pursuing something that was not giving you the peace you needed. What you once called loss may have created room for growth. What you once called waiting may have been preparation. Chosen one, you have to understand that not every unanswered prayer is an abandoned prayer. Sometimes the answer is still developing. Sometimes the person is not the answer. Sometimes the lesson is. Sometimes the transformation is. Sometimes the strength you gain while waiting becomes more valuable than the thing you were originally asking for. And this is why you cannot allow your entire understanding of J to depend on whether this person eventually becomes part of your future in the exact way you imagined. There may be something much deeper happening. Maybe J entered your life to show you what your heart had been suppressing. You may have told yourself that you did not need affection. You may have told yourself that you were perfectly comfortable being alone. You may have convinced yourself that relationships were not important anymore. But then J appeared, and suddenly you realized that there was still a part of you that wanted to be understood. A part of you wanted someone to notice the things you never said. A part of you wanted someone to recognize the effort behind your smile. A part of you wanted to experience a connection where you did not have to explain every part of yourself. That desire is not weakness. Wanting love does not make you weak. Wanting companionship does not make you desperate. Wanting to be understood does not mean that you lack independence. But you must learn to desire love without allowing desire to override discernment. Because there is a dangerous place between genuine hope and emotional attachment to an imagined future. You can begin with a real connection and slowly build an entire story around it. A look becomes a promise. A conversation becomes a sign. A kind gesture becomes evidence. A coincidence becomes confirmation. And before you know it, you are no longer responding to the person who actually exists. You are responding to the person you believe they could become. Chosen one, that distinction is important. Potential is not character. Potential is possibility. Character is demonstrated. Someone can have beautiful potential and still not be ready to love you properly. Someone can have good intentions and still be unable to offer consistency. Someone can care about you and still not be capable of giving you the relationship you desire. And accepting that does not require anger. It requires maturity. You do not have to make someone a villain simply because they could not meet you where you were. Sometimes people are simply in different seasons. Sometimes two people can genuinely care about one another and still not know how to build something healthy together. Sometimes timing matters. Sometimes emotional maturity matters. Sometimes circumstances matter. Sometimes willingness matters. And sometimes the answer is simply that two paths crossed for a reason. But those paths were never meant to become one permanent road. Chosen one. This is where you have to stop demanding that every meaningful connection become a permanent relationship. Meaning does not require permanence. A sunset is meaningful even though it ends. A season is meaningful even though it changes. A conversation can change your life even if it lasts only an hour. A person can awaken something in you without remaining beside you forever. And maybe Jay is one of those people. Or maybe there is more to come. You do not need to decide today. You do not need to force the answer. You can let life reveal what your emotions cannot. And while life is revealing it, you can continue living. That may be one of the hardest lessons for you. Because when you care about someone, you may feel tempted to put everything else on hold. You may check your phone repeatedly. You may revisit old conversations. You may wonder what a certain message meant. You may analyze their tone. You may remember exactly what they wore, what they said, where they stood, how they looked at you. And suddenly your mind becomes a courtroom where you are constantly presenting evidence. They said this. They did that. They looked at me this way. They disappeared after that. They came back. They seemed jealous. They seemed distant. They cared. They did not care. Chosen one, you cannot build peace inside that kind of mental courtroom. At some point, you have to step out. You have to let people speak through their actions. You have to stop interrogating every moment for a hidden message. Because if someone genuinely wants to build something with you, clarity will eventually become visible. You will not need to turn every interaction into a puzzle. And if clarity never comes, that itself is information. Silence can be information. Inconsistency can be information. Avoidance can be information. Repeated disappointment can be information. You do not need another revelation when the pattern has already revealed itself. Chosen one, maybe God is teaching you to recognize patterns instead of isolated moments. One beautiful conversation does not erase months of inconsistency. One apology does not automatically repair repeated behavior. One affectionate moment does not prove commitment. One difficult day does not necessarily destroy a healthy relationship either. This is why discernment looks at the whole picture. You have to look at patterns. How does this person treat you consistently? How do they communicate when things become difficult? How do they respond when you set boundaries? Can they take responsibility? Can they apologize without manipulating you? Can they celebrate your success without competing with you? Can they respect your individuality? Can they communicate their needs? Can they hear yours? Can they disagree without disrespect? These things matter far more than a single intense moment. And perhaps Jay came into your life so that you would learn to look beyond chemistry. Chemistry can pull you toward someone. Character determines whether you can safely build with them. Attraction can start a connection. Consistency sustains it. Words can create hope. Actions create trust. Promises can sound beautiful. Patterns tell the truth. Chosen one, maybe you have spent too much time listening to what people say and not enough time watching what they repeatedly do. And now you are learning. You are learning not to chase explanations from people who repeatedly create confusion. You are learning not to interpret breadcrumbs as a feast. You are learning not to confuse attention with intention. You are learning not to confuse familiarity with compatibility. You are learning not to confuse loneliness with destiny. That last one is especially important because sometimes a person feels like the one simply because they arrived during a lonely season. When you are emotionally hungry, even a small amount of attention can feel enormous. A simple message can feel like rescue. A kind conversation can feel like destiny. A little affection can feel like proof that everything is finally changing. But chosen one, you need more than temporary relief. You need something sustainable. You need something that can exist in ordinary life, not just in emotionally intense moments. You need connection that survives normal days. Because real love is not only about butterflies, it is also about responsibility. It is about showing up when the excitement is gone. It is about communicating when misunderstanding happens. It is about choosing respect when emotions are high. It is about making room for another person's humanity. It is about learning one another over time. And perhaps Jay introduced you to the difference between fantasy and reality. Maybe you discovered that what you imagined was not exactly what existed. Or perhaps you discovered that reality was even more meaningful than the fantasy. Either way, you learned something. And every honest lesson makes you wiser. Chosen one, do not be ashamed of the feelings you had. Do not punish yourself for caring. Do not call yourself foolish because you hoped. Hope is not foolish. Love is not foolish. Trust is not foolish. What matters is what you do once you recognize the truth. You can love someone and still accept reality. You can hope for something and still prepare yourself for another outcome. You can care deeply and still protect your peace. You can remember someone without returning to the same unhealthy pattern. You can appreciate what happened without allowing it to control what happens next. That is strength. And maybe you are being prepared for exactly that kind of strength, because your next chapter may require a version of you who no longer reacts to every emotional wave, a version of you who can pause, a version of you who can observe, a version of you who can pray before making decisions, a version of you who can wait without obsessing, a version of you who can walk away without needing revenge, a version of you who can stay without losing independence. That is the person you are becoming. And perhaps Jay was one of the experiences that helped create that transformation. Chosen one, think about how much you have already survived. There were moments when you thought you would never recover. There were people you thought you could not live without. There were situations you thought would destroy you, and yet you are still here. You adapted, you grew, you continued, you learned, you became stronger. So why would this one situation be the place where your entire identity disappears? It does not have to be. You are bigger than this uncertainty. Your future is bigger than this question. Your purpose is bigger than this person. And perhaps the reason you are hearing this now is because you need to remember that. You have been staring at one door for so long that you may have forgotten there is an entire world around you. There are dreams you have not pursued. There are places you have not seen. There are people you have not met. There are opportunities you have not recognized. There are talents you have not developed. There are prayers you have not even thought to pray yet. Your life is still unfolding. Do not let one chapter convince you that the book is finished. Chosen one, sometimes the biggest mistake we make is assuming that, because something feels emotionally significant, it must also be the final destination. But significance and permanence are not the same. A person can change your direction without becoming your destination. A relationship can awaken your heart without becoming your forever relationship. A disappointment can redirect you towards something far better. And sometimes you only understand that after time has passed. There may come a day when you look back at Jay and say, "No, I understand." Not because you suddenly received an explanation from them, but because you became someone who could finally understand the lesson. You may realize that if Jay had never entered your life, you might never have questioned the standards you were living by. You might never have discovered the wounds that needed healing. You might never have recognized the kind of communication you need. You might never have learned how important emotional safety is. You might never have understood that your worth cannot depend on another person's response. You might never have learned to trust yourself again. That is why you should not measure the value of the connection only by its outcome. Measure it by what it awakened in you. Measure it by what you learned. Measure it by how much stronger your discernment became. Measure it by the boundaries you now know how to establish. Measure it by the courage you developed. Measure it by the ways you now understand yourself more deeply. Chosen one, perhaps Jay, was not sent to give you an answer. Perhaps Jay was allowed to become a question that forced you to look inward. A question that challenged your assumptions. A question that made you ask what you truly want. A question that made you examine your relationship with love. A question that made you confront your fear of rejection. A question that made you realize how much power you were giving away. And maybe the answer is not found in Jay. Maybe the answer is found in you. Maybe the real revelation is that you are becoming someone who can no longer be satisfied with relationships that require you to constantly question your value. You are becoming someone who understands that peace is not boring. Consistency is not boring. Respect is not boring. Healthy communication is not boring. Sometimes what feels unfamiliar is not lack of chemistry. Sometimes it is simply the absence of chaos. If you grew accustomed to uncertainty, peace can initially feel strange. If you grew accustomed to chasing, mutual effort can feel unfamiliar. If you grew accustomed to proving yourself, being accepted freely can feel almost unbelievable. But that does not mean healthy love lacks passion. It means healthy love does not require pain as proof of depth. Chosen one, maybe Jay helped you recognize that. Maybe they showed you what emotional intensity feels like, and now you are learning to distinguish intensity from intimacy. Intensity can happen quickly. Intimacy takes time. Intensity can be built on uncertainty. Intimacy is built on trust. Intensity can make you feel consumed. Intimacy makes you feel known. And perhaps the next relationship in your life will require the wisdom you are gaining now. You will recognize what you could not recognize before. You will ask different questions. You will move differently. You will not give your entire heart to potential before observing character. You will not ignore red flags because you are afraid of losing someone. You will not mistake being wanted occasionally for being valued consistently. You will not accept confusion as the price of connection. You will understand that your peace matters too, and that is growth. Chosen one, maybe that is why Jay appeared when they did. The timing may have been connected to your preparation, not necessarily because Jay was the final person, but because the experience prepared you to recognize what comes next. Sometimes you meet one person and learn what you need. Then you meet another and realize why the previous lesson mattered. Sometimes one connection teaches you what you will never tolerate again. Another teaches you what healthy love feels like. One reveals your wounds. Another meets the healed version of you. One teaches you boundaries. Another respects them. One makes you question your worth. Another never asks you to prove it. But you have to become ready to recognize the difference. And maybe your current season is about becoming ready. Chosen one, do not rush that process. There is no need to force yourself to stop caring overnight. Healing is not a switch. You may have good days and difficult days. You may feel free one morning and miss Jay that evening. You may think you are completely over it and then suddenly remember something. That does not mean you are going backward. It means you are human. Healing is not the absence of memory. Healing is the absence of control. The memory can remain without controlling your choices. The person can remain in your history without controlling your future. The lesson can remain without the pain remaining. And slowly, you may reach a point where you can think about Jay without needing anything from the memory. No message, no explanation, no apology, no reunion, no confirmation. Just gratitude for what you learned and peace about what you cannot control. Chosen one, that kind of peace is powerful. Because when you stop needing the past to change, you become available for the future. You stop negotiating with memories. You stop trying to rewrite conversations. You stop imagining how things would have been if you had said something differently. You stop blaming yourself for everything. You stop blaming them for everything. You simply accept that the experience happened, it affected you, and now you get to decide what you carry forward. Carry the wisdom. Leave the self-doubt, carry the standards. Leave the desperation, carry the courage. Leave the fear, carry the love you discovered within yourself. Leave the belief that someone else must validate it. Chosen one, there is something else you need to recognize. Maybe Jay did not enter your life because you were incomplete. Maybe Jay entered your life because you were ready to experience a part of yourself that had not yet been awakened. That is very different. You are not half a person waiting for another person to complete you. You are a whole person capable of sharing life with another whole person. And when you understand that, relationships become partnerships rather than rescue missions. You no longer need someone to save you from yourself. You want someone who can walk beside you while you continue becoming. You no longer need someone to prove that you are lovable. You want someone whose presence reflects mutual love. You no longer need someone to give your life meaning. You want someone who can add meaning without replacing your purpose. Maybe that is the lesson Jay helped introduce, and perhaps this is why you feel different now. You may still care, but you are beginning to care differently. You are beginning to understand that love does not mean surrendering your judgment. You are beginning to understand that hope does not mean ignoring evidence. You are beginning to understand that faith does not mean forcing a specific outcome. Faith can also mean trusting God enough to release the outcome. That may be one of the hardest forms of faith. To say, I want this, but I trust you more than I trust my own imagination. To say, I care about this person, but I will not build my identity around them. To say, if this is meant to grow, let it grow in truth. To say, if it is not meant for me, give me the strength to release it. That is not giving up. That is surrender. And surrender is not weakness. Sometimes surrender is the strongest thing you can do. Chosen one, you may have spent so much time asking for a sign that you forgot to ask for wisdom. Ask for wisdom. Ask for discernment. Ask for emotional clarity. Ask for the courage to accept reality. Ask for the strength to release what is unhealthy. Ask for patience when things are unclear. Ask for humility when your emotions become loud. Ask for the ability to recognize genuine love when it arrives, because the right relationship will not only excite your heart, it will also respect your mind. It will honor your boundaries. It will make room for your goals. It will not demand that you choose between love and your identity. It will not require you to shrink. It will not punish you for having needs. It will not make you afraid to communicate. And perhaps Jah has taught you exactly why those things matter. Maybe you now know what you want because you experienced what you did not want. Maybe you now know what peace feels like because you have experienced uncertainty. Maybe you now recognize your own strength because you have survived emotional confusion. Maybe you now understand your boundaries because someone crossed them. Maybe you now understand your needs because someone failed to meet them. And while those experiences may have hurt, they can still become wisdom if you allow them to. Chosen one, do not let pain become bitterness. Let it become discernment. Do not let disappointment become cynicism. Let it become wisdom. Do not let rejection become self-hatred. Let it become redirection. Do not let uncertainty become obsession. Let it become an invitation to slow down. Do not let one person's inability to love you properly convince you that you are difficult to love. You are not. Sometimes the problem is not that you are too much. Sometimes you were simply asking the wrong person for the right thing. Sometimes you were offering your heart in a place that did not know how to hold it. And sometimes the lesson is to stop asking a person for what they have repeatedly demonstrated they cannot give. That does not mean they are evil. It means you must be honest. Chosen one, honesty will save you from years of unnecessary waiting. If someone is inconsistent, acknowledge it. If someone is unavailable, acknowledge it. If someone communicates clearly, appreciate it. If someone shows up, notice it. If someone respects you, value it. If someone repeatedly disregards your boundaries, believe what you are seeing. You do not need to turn every person into a mystery. Sometimes people are exactly who their patterns show them to be. And maybe this is the maturity you are developing through the story with Jay. You are learning to see people as they are instead of as you hope they will become. That does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming clear. And clarity does not destroy love. It protects healthy love. Because when you are clear, you can love without manipulation. You can communicate without games. You can walk away without revenge. You can stay without fear. You can make decisions based on reality rather than fantasy. Chosen one, perhaps this is the real shift happening in you. You are no longer asking, how can I make this happen? You are beginning to ask, is this healthy for me? That question changes your entire life. You stop chasing. You start observing. You stop proving. You start discerning. You stop forcing. You start allowing. You stop trying to control another person's feelings. You start taking responsibility for your own. And suddenly, the relationship no longer has the power to determine your emotional identity. That is freedom. Maybe Jay came into your life to teach you how to become free while still having a heart. Because being free does not mean becoming emotionless. It means your emotions no longer own you. You can feel deeply and still think clearly. You can love deeply and still set boundaries. You can miss someone and still choose yourself. You can hope and still accept uncertainty. You can pray and still take wise action. You can believe in something beautiful without forcing it to happen. Chosen one, that balance is precious. And maybe you are learning it now because something greater is ahead. Not necessarily a specific person. Not necessarily a specific relationship. Something greater in you. A stronger identity. A calmer heart. A wiser mind. A clearer sense of purpose. A deeper understanding of what love should look like. A greater ability to recognize what belongs in your life and what does not. Maybe Jay was part of the training ground. Maybe the connection challenged you because you needed to grow. Maybe the uncertainty forced you to stop relying on external validation. Maybe the emotional intensity forced you to confront yourself. Maybe the distance forced you to discover your independence. Maybe the hope forced you to clarify your desires. Maybe the disappointment forced you to raise your standards. Maybe the entire experience was preparing you for a future in which you will not abandon yourself for the sake of being chosen by someone else. And chosen one, that is a powerful place to arrive. Because once you understand your own worth, you stop begging other people to confirm it. You stop chasing people who are unsure. You stop making excuses for repeated disrespect. You stop accepting half-hearted effort. You stop treating crumbs as evidence of abundance. And you start recognizing that genuine connection should be mutual. You should not have to carry everything. You should not have to initiate everything. You should not have to repair everything. You should not have to explain basic respect. You should not have to constantly prove that you deserve consideration. A healthy relationship is not one person pursuing and another person occasionally responding. It is two people participating, two people communicating, two people learning, two people adjusting, two people showing up, two people choosing honesty. And perhaps this is why Jay is still on your mind. Because the connection represented something larger than the person. It represented a possibility of being understood, a possibility of being loved, a possibility of starting again, a possibility of experiencing something different. And perhaps the important thing is not whether that exact possibility becomes reality with Jay. The important thing is that you now know you are ready to believe in possibility again. You are ready to open your heart again. You are ready to desire more. You are ready to stop pretending that you do not care. You are ready to become honest with yourself. And that is beautiful. Chosen one, maybe your heart was never broken because it was weak. Maybe it was broken because you were learning how strong it could become. Maybe the cracks became places where wisdom entered. Maybe the disappointment created room for discernment. Maybe the confusion pushed you toward clarity. Maybe the waiting taught you patience. Maybe the uncertainty taught you trust. Maybe the experience with J became part of the journey that led you back to yourself. And now you are beginning to understand that your story is not defined by who stayed or who left. Your story is defined by who you became. You became wiser, you became more honest. You became more discerning. You became more protective of your peace. You became more aware of your emotional needs. You became more courageous about your boundaries. You became more capable of loving without disappearing inside another person. And perhaps there is still more transformation ahead. Maybe there are parts of you that are only now beginning to wake up. Maybe you are about to understand why certain doors had to close. Maybe you are about to recognize why certain relationships could not continue in the form you wanted. Maybe you are about to see why certain delays protected you. Maybe you are about to discover that what you thought was a detour was actually part of the route. And perhaps, chosen one, Joe, was one piece of that route. Not the whole road, not the entire destination, one piece. One chapter, one encounter, one lesson, one awakening. And sometimes one piece can change the way you walk through everything that follows. So keep moving, keep growing, keep becoming. Do not stop your life while waiting for one person's decision. Do not stop your dreams while waiting for one person's message. Do not stop your healing while waiting for one person's apology. Do not stop your progress while wondering whether someone from the past will return. If they return, let their actions speak. If they stay, let their consistency speak. If they leave, let their departure teach you what it needs to teach you. But you keep walking, you keep building, you keep becoming. Because the future does not belong to the version of you who waits endlessly for another person to decide. The future belongs to the version of you who knows that whatever happens, you will be okay. Chosen one, imagine what happens when you truly believe that. You become less afraid. You become less reactive. You become more selective. You stop accepting whatever appears simply because you are afraid nothing else will come. You stop trying to hold on to people who are trying to let go. You stop trying to convince people to see what they are not ready to see. You stop begging for clarity, and you start trusting yourself. That is the real transformation. Because perhaps the deepest reason Jay came into your life was not simply to teach you about another person. Perhaps Jay came into your life to teach you about you, your desires, your wounds, your boundaries, your standards, your capacity for love, your capacity for hope, your capacity for surrender, your capacity to survive disappointment, your capacity to choose peace. And perhaps that is why the connection still feels significant. Not because you are supposed to remain trapped in the past, but because there is still wisdom there. There is still something you are integrating. There is still something you are becoming. And once you fully receive the lesson, you may no longer need to keep reopening the chapter to understand it. You will simply carry the wisdom forward. Chosen one, there may come a moment when you realize that the question was never, why did God let Jay enter my life? The question may become, why did I need this experience at that exact point in my journey? We in that question can open another door. Maybe you needed to learn patience. Maybe you needed to learn boundaries. Maybe you needed to learn self-respect. Maybe you needed to learn that love cannot be forced. Maybe you needed to learn that your intuition deserves attention but also discernment. Maybe you needed to learn that not every emotional connection is a commitment. Maybe you needed to learn that the right person will not require you to become someone else. Maybe you needed to learn how to let go without becoming bitter. Maybe you needed to learn how to hope without becoming attached to one specific outcome. Maybe you needed to learn how to trust the process without needing to know every detail. And perhaps, chosen one, you are still learning. So do not rush yourself. Let the lesson deepen. Let your heart settle. Let your mind become quiet. Let reality speak. Let time reveal what cannot be seen today. And as you continue forward, remember that you do not need to chase what is truly aligned with your life. You do not need to manipulate timing. You do not need to force communication. You do not need to manufacture closeness. You do not need to make yourself smaller to keep someone's attention. You do not need to compete for love. You do not need to prove your worth. You do not need to become perfect to deserve something genuine. You simply need to remain honest about who you are and what you need. Because when you know yourself, you become harder to confuse. When you know your standards, you become harder to manipulate. When you know your worth, you become harder to convince that crumbs are enough. When you know your purpose, you become harder to distract. And perhaps, Jay, was one of the experiences that brought you closer to that knowledge. Chosen one, maybe that is the hidden blessing. You thought the blessing would be receiving the person. But perhaps the blessing was receiving the wisdom. You thought the miracle would be the relationship. But perhaps the miracle was the transformation. You thought the answer would come through Jay. but perhaps the answer was being revealed within you. And maybe that is why you are still here, still listening, still thinking, still processing, still trying to understand. Because something inside you knows that this story is bigger than a simple question of whether someone loves you. It is about whether you have learned to love yourself enough to accept what is real. It is about whether you can trust yourself enough to walk away from what repeatedly hurts you. It is about whether you can remain open-hearted without becoming unprotected. It is about whether you can believe in love without losing discernment. It is about whether you can trust God without trying to control every detail. And perhaps this is where your next level of growth begins. You do not need every answer today. You need enough wisdom to take the next step. You do not need to know what Jay will do 6 months from now. You need to know what you will do today. You do not need to predict the future. You need to protect your peace in the present. You do not need to decode every sign. You need to recognize consistent reality. You do not need to force a relationship. You need to allow mutuality to reveal itself. And if Jay is meant to walk beside you again, let that journey be built on something stronger than memory. Let it be built on growth. Let it be built on honesty. Let it be built on mutual effort. Let it be built on changed behavior. Let it be built on respect. Let it be built on emotional maturity. Because returning is not the same as changing. Someone can return and still repeat the same patterns. Someone can miss you and still not be ready. Someone can care and still be incompatible. Someone can apologize and still need to demonstrate growth over time. So do not be impressed only by words. Watch the fruit. Watch the consistency. Watch whether the new behavior survives beyond the emotional moment. Chosen one, this is how you protect your heart without closing it. You do not build walls. You build doors with locks. You remain capable of love, but you decide who receives access. You remain compassionate, but you do not ignore patterns. You remain hopeful, but you do not surrender your discernment. You remain open, but you do not become available to everything. And perhaps this is the mature love you are being prepared for. A love where two people can be vulnerable without becoming dependent. A love where two people can have boundaries without creating distance. A love where two people can disagree without destroying trust. A love where two people can grow individually while building something together. A love where peace is not constantly interrupted by uncertainty. Maybe Jay gave you a glimpse of what you want. Maybe Jay showed you what you do not want. Maybe both are true. And now you have a clearer picture. That clarity is valuable. Chosen one, there is no wasted lesson when you actually learn from it. There is no wasted season when you become wiser through it. There is no wasted heartbreak when it teaches you to stop abandoning yourself. There is no wasted waiting when it teaches you patience. There is no wasted disappointment when it teaches you discernment. There is no wasted encounter when it helps you understand your own heart more deeply. And perhaps this is why the real reason Jay came into your life cannot be reduced to one simple sentence. Maybe the purpose had layers. Maybe there was something you needed to learn immediately and something you will only understand years later. Maybe the connection affected your confidence, your standards, your emotional awareness, your understanding of love, and your relationship with yourself. Maybe it changed the way you see people. Maybe it changed the way you see yourself. Maybe it changed what you will accept. Maybe it changed what you desire. Maybe it changed how you pray. Maybe it changed how you trust. Maybe it changed how you wait. And perhaps, chosen one, that is why this chapter matters. Not because it contains every answer, but because it prepared you to ask better questions. And better questions lead to better decisions. Instead of asking, how do I get Jay to choose me? You ask, is this connection mutually healthy? Instead of asking, how do I make Jay stay? You ask, does Jay willingly show up? Instead of asking, what can I do to make this work? You ask, are both of us willing to do the work? Instead of asking, why am I not enough? You ask, why am I measuring my worth through someone else's behavior? Instead of asking, what if I lose Jay? You ask, what happens if I lose myself trying to keep Jay? That question may save you, because you can recover from losing a relationship. But losing yourself can take much longer to repair. Chosen one, never again make someone else's presence the price of your peace. Never again make someone else's uncertainty the foundation of your identity. Never again make yourself smaller so someone else can feel larger. Never again silence your needs simply because you are afraid that honesty will make someone leave. The person who belongs in your life will not need you to disappear in order to remain. And perhaps Jay helped you discover that truth. Maybe you did not recognize it at first. Maybe you resisted it. Maybe you hoped things would change. But now you are seeing more clearly. And clarity changes what you tolerate. Once you know something, you cannot unknow it. Once you recognize a pattern, you cannot pretend it is invisible. Once you understand your value, you cannot comfortably return to the places where you were treated as though you had none. That is growth. That is awakening. And maybe this awakening is one of the reasons this person appeared when they did. Chosen one. Your life may be entering a season where you stop asking for permission to become who you were meant to be. You will stop waiting for someone to believe in you before you believe in yourself. You will stop waiting for someone to validate your dreams. You will stop waiting for someone to confirm that you are worthy of love. You will stop waiting for the past to apologize before you allow yourself to move forward. And when you reach that place, something changes. You become available for a different kind of life. You become available for relationships that are built on mutual respect. You become available for opportunities that match your growth. You become available for peace because you are no longer addicted to uncertainty. And maybe, just maybe, that is the greater reason this chapter had to happen. Not to keep you stuck wondering about Jay, but to move you forward with a deeper understanding of yourself. Because the more you understand yourself, the less easily you can be distracted from your purpose. And chosen one, perhaps your purpose is bigger than romance. There are things you are supposed to build, things you are supposed to learn, people you are supposed to encourage, places you are supposed to go, versions of yourself you are supposed to become. Your life has dimensions that one relationship cannot fulfill. Do not make romance the only evidence that your life is meaningful. Love can be beautiful. Connection can be powerful. But your existence has purpose beyond being chosen by another human being. You are allowed to build. You are allowed to dream. You are allowed to become. You are allowed to experience joy that has nothing to do with Jay. You are allowed to laugh again. You are allowed to make plans. You are allowed to become excited about tomorrow. You are allowed to stop checking whether someone from the past is watching. You are allowed to move forward. And if Jay is meant to meet you in that future, they will meet a version of you who is stronger, clearer, and more grounded. Not the version who was waiting helplessly. The version who kept living. The version who kept growing. The version who learned. The version who chose peace. Chosen one, that is the version you should become regardless of what happens. Because when you become that person, you win either way. If the connection grows in a healthy way, you will have the wisdom to participate without losing yourself. If the connection does not grow, you will have the strength to move forward without losing yourself. Either way, you remain whole. And perhaps that is the freedom God has been trying to reveal to you all along. You are not powerless. You are not trapped. You are not required to wait forever. You are not required to force anything. You are not required to decode every silence. You are not required to carry a relationship by yourself. You are allowed to observe. You are allowed to choose. You are allowed to say yes. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to protect your heart. And you are allowed to trust that what belongs in your life will not require you to betray yourself to keep it. Chosen one, perhaps the next part of your story will become clearer when you stop looking backward every few minutes. There is nothing wrong with remembering. But there is a difference between remembering and returning. Remember the lesson. Do not automatically return to the pattern. Remember the good. Do not ignore the reality. Remember the connection. Do not forget yourself. Remember what you hoped for. But make sure your future is built on what is actually possible, not only on what you once imagined. And as you continue walking, you may notice that the emotional hold, Jay, once had begins to weaken, not because you suddenly stop caring, but because you start caring about yourself too. You begin to understand that your peace deserves protection, your time deserves respect, your energy deserves direction, your heart deserves honesty, your future deserves attention. And slowly, the question becomes less about what Jay is doing and more about what you are doing with the life in front of you. That is where the shift happens. That is where your power returns. That is where your story begins to expand again. And perhaps there is another revelation waiting for you there. Because once you stop making Jay the center of the mystery, you may finally notice all the other things God has been trying to show you through this season.